Hello aspiring developers, welcome to today's session. I'm excited to be your instructor. Today we're going to recap on whatever we learned yesterday, and in the last session we were learning about linking Visual Studio Code to GitHub, and that means we have to recap on how to create a new GitHub repository. So let's start with creating a GitHub repository, and we're going to call it GitHub. Let's call it GitHub Basics. Here we can give it a description of these are the basic. We can give it the description of introduction to Git. It should be a public. I'm going to have it as a public repo because I want anyone on the internet to be able to see it. Then I'll add a readme. Then I will create the repository. Yeah, so this is a remote repository. It's created in our GitHub account, and now we are going to learn. We are going to learn how to clone. This is also a recap of yesterday's video. So you just come to code, then show it's in local, then clone HTTPS, and then you copy this URL to the clipboard. So once you've copied that to the clipboard, now we're going to clone this remote repository in our local machine. So let's head over to our terminal. Yes, now to access your terminal as directed in the previous video, just go to the folder where you want your projects to be in. For me, my desired folder is desktop, so you can see I'm at my desktop folder. From there, just type git bash here. You right click and type on git bash here. So that will definitely open your git bash terminal, and this is where we're going to use all the git commands. So we want to copy the current repository that is hosted remotely in our GitHub account and bring it to our local machine. So that's why we're going to use the git clone command. So you just type on git clone, then you right click and paste. So this is the link to the hosted GitHub repository. Then you hit on enter. So you can see it's cloning into GitHub Basics. So from there you just cd. You can see here we have cloned into GitHub Basics. So you cd into GitHub exactly as it's written up there, GitHub Basics. And the command cd means change directory, as we had earlier stated. So we are changing the directory from the desktop into the GitHub Basics directory. You can interchangeably use directory as a folder. So now that we have already changed our directory into the GitHub Basics excuse me, that we just cloned, the next command is to open our code editor, and we are going to use code dot. As earlier stated, code dot means this dot means you're opening this code editor in the current directory. Our current directory is GitHub Basics. So you just hit on enter, and it will definitely open Visual Studio Code for us. So now, yeah, let's head straight to Visual Studio Code. So as you noticed, when you typed on code dot on our terminal, Git VS Code was opened. So Git bash opened for us our VS Code in our GitHub Basics folder or directory. So the dot was to open in this GitHub Basics directory. So now this is the exact same file that was in our GitHub repository. It was hosted there, but now what git clone does, it copies it into our local machine. So now we took it from our hosted repository, which is the GitHub, and now we have it in our local machine. So now let's learn more about that. Is enough of the recap of the previous session, and now without further ado we can dive into today's session, which is Git Basics. So we are going to do introduction to Git, and by introduction to Git I will start by taking you through Git status, the states in Git. So let's just create another header file here and we call them Git States. So we have the modified state in Git. So this modified state, this is a state which is previously committed, but you have made changes to them since the last commit. So you're also going to understand what commit means. Then we also have the tracked. When we talk of modified state, we can conclusively also talk about the tracked state, because Git recognizes these changes, but they have not yet been staged for the next commit. So we can also talk about the staged state. The staged state, after modifying a tracked file, you can now use the git add command to stage that change. Staging is just the process where you prepare a change for the next commit, and once a file is staged, now it is including the next commit. And when we talk of commit, then it means there is a committed state. So this committed state, when you run git commit, you create a new commit which includes all the changes that were staged. So these changes are now put as a new part of the version history. You can remember we said Git is a version control system. So by version control, and also from the full meaning of Git, we learned that it is a tracking system. So we track our files from the modified state to the staged state and to the committed states. And this we do by learning the Git commands. So now let's modify, as we've modified our readme file. When we first git cloned this readme file, it only had these two lines, but now you can even see VS Code highlighting this, and this is now the Git local working changes, because what we've added so far is the Git states, that of which we've written about the tracked state, the modified state, the staged, and the committed state. This you're going to learn about them as we proceed in the course. So now straight ahead, we're going to fire up our terminal. As we said, just go to view, then terminal, and so your terminal is opened. And if your terminal does not excuse me, if your terminal does not directly open with Git Bash, then you can go through the previous video where we talked about setting up Git Bash to open as the default excuse me, Windows terminal. So just select default profile, then you choose on Git Bash, and you're good to go. Yeah, so now we were talking about the git add command to change the state of a file from modified or tracked to staged. So here we can let's just add, we can say here git add, and when you say git add, you must include the file name, the name of the file that you're adding. So here we have readme. This readme is in the tracked state because we cloned it from an existing GitHub repository, and in that GitHub repository it was already tracked by Git. So now we've modified it. What we've done right now is the modification. This is the modification. That's what we've done right now. And now we need to save this file. Remember, anytime you edit a file, you have to save it, and when you save it, realize that there is this M that comes here. This M shows that it's in the modified state. As you can see from this hover, the hover says it's modified. So the modified state, once you save it excuse me, it comes from the tracked state to the modified state. Now we want to stage the changes that we've made in this readme file. Now there is where we use the git add, and we said git add, you must include the file name. So the file name that has been modified is the readme.md. So you hit on enter, and what we've done now, we've added this file. Now it comes from the modified state to the staged state. now that the file is already staged, the next thing that we need to do is we need to have it in the committed state. So once again, the command that we're going to use here is git commit. Remember, -m is for to set the message of the commit message. So let me write here commit message. Anytime you commit, you must give the message of whatever changes you've made to that file. And you also must remember that when you commit a staged file, it means that you are creating when you modify a tracked file using the git add command, just as we said earlier, you prepare it for staging, and staging is the process of preparing changes for the next commit. So when you add, you are preparing it for the next changes. You are preparing the changes for the next commit. And now when you commit, once a staged file is commit, it is now included in the next commit. So here the next commit will be the one that we type here, git commit, just as we said up there, -m. This -m is to set the message flag, so you must set it, and then you must write the message that showing what you've done up here. So what we've done up there is we've added state notes. Hit on enter. So now you see that there is this message here from main, and the ID is there, the commit ID, then the commit message. So added notes. Also, because this is a tracking system, it tells you the exact what you've done. You've just changed one file, and you've changed this one file by adding 15 insertions. So now that you've already staged, as we said, once a file is staged and it is included in the next commit, now it is ready to be pushed. It is part of the version history, and now it is ready to be pushed to the existing repository. These changes have been made and have been fully made to the main branch, but of the local repository. Now we want to push these changes so that they are made to the hosted repository where we cloned from. So now there is this command that there's this git push command. Let me just add it here for our reference. So git push command, this one we're going to use to now sync the changes between this local repository or this local file to the hosted or the remote file that we cloned this this repository from. So once you've typed git push, just hit on enter. Yeah, so it's pushing to the repository. Yeah, exactly, that's it. So here we can see some details or logs about what has been happening. We can see deltas reused there. We can also see, but most importantly, we see where we are pushing to. We are pushing to this link. This is the link. If you can remember well, this is the link of the repository that we copied and cloned. So all the changes that we've made on this file, we are pushing it back to that same repository. Yeah, so basically that's Git states. You have to remember the tracked state, the modified state, using add to send it to the staged state, using commit to send it to the committed state, and using push to publish it to the online Git repository. So whatever git push does, maybe that's what we can now explain. It just uploads the local repository content to the remote repository. So it is used to share your changes with others or to update the remote repository with the local changes. So the basic syntax is git push. And that's all about Git states. And so now we are going to learn more Git commands. But first, let us go back to our GitHub Basics repository and see the changes that we've made to the README. Yeah, now that we're back to our GitHub page, just tap on GitHub Basics, the one that we created. So we can see that these commands that we added are already here. You can see that the Git states have been updated to our online repository. So Git states are here. We have the tracked state, we have the modified state, we have the stage state, and the commit stage. Yet at first we only had GitHub Basics and Introduction to Git. So all the changes we made, like Git states, are now available in our online repository. You can refresh it, and you see that our changes are still there. If at all your changes were not there, you can just refresh and it will update your online repository with Git, with the new changes that we already committed. And so yeah, that's it for cloning a repository, making changes to a repository, to a file in a repository, committing, adding it, committing it, and pushing it. So now we'll also learn how to initialize a repository from scratch. So first, let's create a repository. Currently, Git Bash does not. Let's say Git and GitHub does not support creation of a repository via the Git Bash terminal, not unless you have the GitHub CLI, of which you have to learn commands like the gh auth login, the gh create repo. But so for now, we are going to just create the repository. Let's create it as Git Commands. Then here we will say continuation of Git. How was the previous one called? Git Basics. So continuation of Git Basics. Yeah, this will also be a public repository. Here we won't add a readme file. So Git Commands, continuation of Git Basics, just have it as public. You don't need to add a readme file, so just create the repository. So now you see that we have a repository. It is public, but it has nothing in it, not even a readme file. It doesn't even have a branch, like we'll talk about in the next session. So this repository is blank and has nothing. So we want to set it up from our Visual Studio Code. So just tap on this link, because this link is what guides us to where we are pushing our repository to. So now that you already have this link, now we're going to do everything from scratch using Visual Studio and see it come to this repository. So now let's head back to our Visual Studio Code and type a little commands on the Visual Studio Code terminal. Yeah, so here we are at our Visual Studio Code. If you haven't opened Visual Studio Code, just navigate to the same projects folder or any empty projects folder of your own desire. Then go to View, go to Terminal, and now here we're going to start a GitHub repository from scratch, a Git repository from scratch, and then we publish it to the GitHub repository that we created remotely without you can remember we created a GitHub remotely and it had nothing in it. So now we want to put a little files in it. We can even start by creating a folder. When you come to your Explorer up here, you can see this folder icon, so you can tap on it. Then you can say Git Basics, type on enter. Then here in Git Basics, you can just create a readme .md file, markdown file. Then here in the terminal, make sure this terminal is reading the folder that we just created. So I'll just retype here Git Basics, the name of the folder I just created. You change the directory to that. So you notice that it is not struct. Now that we've already talked about Git States, you notice that it is not having any Git repository. So this readme, you can say let's say header, or you can say about. Yeah, so it is about initial about initiating a GitHub repository from scratch using Visual Studio Code, using VS Code editor. Yeah, then you can save it. So now this is just a normal file in our local repository, like any other file that we've always been having, but now we want to initialize a Git repository. So the command is git init. You can always write down these commands and you can reference to them later, because they'll always be of help to you when you need to a point of reference. So git init initializes a GitHub repository. So you can see that at first we were not having anything here, but now after initializing a Git repository, we now have a master branch here. Another thing you can notice is this untracked. This U. This U stands for untracked. Initially, we had talked about the three states, which was the modified or tracked state, the staged state, and the committed state. But now what we hadn't talked about was the untracked state. So this untracked state, these are the files that exist in your working directory, that is locally or offline, I can use that, but they are not being tracked by Git. Git does not know about them. So they have never been added to the staging area, or they have never been committed. So that is what we call an untracked file or an untracked state. So you can say let's track this file, and then you save. You save. So once you've saved it, just as we had earlier discussed, git add and the file name. So what git add does, as we had talked about earlier, it now tracks this untracked file. You see it has come from U to A. So it means that at first it was untracked, now it is tracked. But you can remember the earlier one, when we saved, it came from a plain file to M. So M is, it came from an unmodified file to a modified file. But if Git did not know about it totally, it comes from an untracked state to a tracked state. So after tracking, you know that we should stage it. So we stage it by git add, then we commit it by git commit, and the message is let's say initial git repository. Yeah, so now we see that the master, and we can see that this is a root commit with an ID, and the message is initial git repository. Here also it also tells us that one file was changed, it had 7 insertions, and the create mode, this file was created, so it is under a creation mode with the ID and the name of the file being created. So the file created is readme.md. Now we want to push this file to our GitHub repository. First, you're aware that that online GitHub repository is not linked to this at any given point. So now the first thing we want to do, we want to link this repository to the one that is hosted on GitHub. So with that, there is a command that is used to link the local to the online or the hosted repository. So that is git remote add. So we are adding the remote repository, then origin, then there you need to paste. You can remember we copied the path to that empty git repository online. So you copy that path, and then here, so git remote add origin and the path to that file. So you just press on enter. Now you have added the remote file. You have now linked the remote file to the local file. So the next thing that you do, git push. This -u flag is set so that we don't have to keep writing the origin master. So now let's wait for it to send the objects. You can see that we are creating a new branch master, and that is this, and then we are pushing to a branch master. This now you'll see it in the remote repository, because this is happening to the remote repository that we earlier copied. So branch master, then we say that we set up to track origin master. That's the function of this -u origin master. The -u flag origin master is setting this current branch, which is master, this one here. This is the current branch master, this one. So we are setting this current branch master, and now we are tracking it to origin master, and that's what is happening here. And this origin master is being created as a new branch and being set as the overhead branch in GitHub, Janja Programmers, Git Commands.git, the one we created with no file at all. So now that that is done, let us go back to our GitHub page and we see whether we've successfully initialized a Git repository from the local machine and pushed it to the hosted repository. So let's head to our GitHub. Yeah, now we have to just refresh. You can remember this is the empty repository we created. Now what we need to do is refresh it. Yeah, and you see here now we have the new Git commands, the Git commands. Then we have it. We have our README, the one that we created, readme.md. Then we also wrote our header was about, and we wrote a sentence there about initiating a GitHub repository from scratch using Visual Studio Code Editor, and we also set it to the untracked stage and wrote a text file there. Let's track this file. So that means we have successfully initiated a new GitHub repository from our Visual Studio Code Editor. We have added it, we have committed it, and we have finally pushed it to our empty Git repository. So just as I said, for now there is no current Git command that I know of that can be used to directly publish a GitHub repository. Though if you feel that these Git codes are a bit tiresome or hectic, you can check back for tomorrow's session, and there will be a few shortcuts as to how you can quickly navigate this, because we want you to learn web development in this very short period, and we don't want you to keep stressing about commands, using Git commands and such stuff, if there is an easier way. So tomorrow's session, the recap of all this will be done using shortcuts, so you can learn how easy it will be, and it will leave you with enough time to grasp the core concepts of web development. So thank you for your concentration to this time. We also want to say thank you for your commitment from the first day to this third day. Even as you prepare for the remaining sessions, we wish you all the best. In case you experience any errors, we still urge you to feel free to post it in the comment section, in the YouTube comment section. Feel free to post it in the WhatsApp platform. Feel free to send direct messages to the instructors. For now, I wish you a happy coding week. Peace out.